Hey guys, Crispy Bacon back with another build for you. In this video, we will be covering an extremely powerful Titan PvE build that I call Light Blade. This is technically a support build, but it is actually one of the strongest boss killing builds out there in Season of Arrivals. This build focuses on buffing your allies, debuffing your enemies, as well as dealing a ridiculous amount of damage through our weapons and our exotics. We'll get into more detail in just a few, but first I wanted to describe the main combo for this build, which consists of buffing ourselves and our allies with the Lumina's 35% weapon damage bonus, using Peregrine Greaves combined with Hammer Strike to debuff our enemies, and then using a combination of high energy fire and lucent blade combined with falling guillotine to do a ridiculous amount of damage to any boss or major. The neutral game of this build is also very good, never having to reload our weapons, having our melee ability anytime we want it as long as we have an enemy within sight, and then having our Peregrine Greaves combined with a trench barrel shotgun to quickly take down majors. Make sure you check the timestamps at the bottom of this video to make sure you're watching the relevant information for you. Let's first go over all of the equipment required to make this build yourself. In our primary slot, we will have the exotic hand cannon known as Lumina. We will prefer that this weapon have the catalyst, so make sure you get that catalyst to drop and then level it up all the way. In our energy slot, we will be using any trench barrel auto-loading holster shotgun. In my instance, I have 7th Seraph CQC-12, but you can use any shotgun that you prefer. And lastly, in our heavy slot, we will be using the Falling Guillotine. Feel free to switch this out with any of your favorite swords, but I do believe that Falling Guillotine will be the strongest and best choice in this case. For our exotic armor piece, we'll be using the Peregrine Greaves Exotic Titan Leg Armor. For those who do not know, Peregrine Greaves' exotic perk is called Peregrine Strike. All shoulder charge abilities, Seismic Strike, Hammer Strike, or Shield Bash deal bonus damage when activated in the air. This damage is no joke and will be enhanced even further when we talk about the mods for this build. Speaking of mods, let's start from our helmet and work our way down. On our helmet we'll have Heavy Ammo Finder and Taking Charge. On our arms we'll have Enhanced Impact Induction and High Energy Fire. On our chest piece we'll have Inferno Whip, Sword Reserves, and Lucent Blade. On our greaves, we'll have Shotgun Scavenger and Enhanced Sword Scavenger. And then on our Titan mark, we'll have Solar Plexus, 1-2 Finisher, and Empowered Finish. As for our stats, we'll want to focus on Resilience, Recovery, and Intellect. And for our subclass, we'll be using Top Tree Sunbreaker, known as Code of the Fire Forged. So with the build overview out of the way, we can go back and discuss each moving part of this build to its full potential. So going back to Lumina, when we kill enemies with a masterworked catalyst Lumina, we actually spawn 2 noble rounds, which are these white floating orbs. I'll refer to them as noble rounds from here on out. And when we absorb these noble rounds, we actually partially refill the magazine for Lumina, which means that we never have to reload as long as we continue to kill enemies. But even more important, we can fire off these noble rounds at our allies when we hipfire, and this actually buffs our allies and ourselves with a 35% weapon damage bonus. For a comparison, this is actually an equivalent buff to when we step inside of a Titan bubble. The weapons of light damage bonus is also 35%, which means that as long as we have Lumina, we have a roaming Titan bubble in terms of damage bonus for our allies. Additionally, when we shoot these noble rounds at our allies, it also heals them, which means that we can help keep our allies safe in a dangerous activity. As for our other exotic with this build, the Peregrine Greaves do a lot of damage when we jump in the air and use our Hammer Strike ability, which also debuffs the enemy that we struck, providing us with an additional 30% damage buff against that target. This is made even stronger because of the fact that we're using Solar Plexus from this season's artifact, which gives our solar melee abilities additional damage. Add on Inferno Whip mod to stagger any unstoppable enemies, and we have a very strong mid-air shoulder charge here. Now since this Peregrine Greaves Hammer Strike combo is so powerful, we want to use it all the time, right? Now this is actually accomplished very easily with this build because of the 1-2 Finisher mod, which makes it so that when we finish an enemy, we actually restore the entirety of our melee ability, and it only takes 1/6 of our super energy. This is perfect because the super for the subclass is actually pretty underwhelming for PvE, but the synergies don't just stop there. With the Empowered Finish mod, we actually become charged with light anytime we use our finisher, only using another 1/10 of our super energy. But what's incredible about this build is that this super drain doesn't even matter because of the fact that we're using Solar Plexus, which makes it so that every time we use a finisher, we actually gain super energy, which offsets all of the super energy drain from these other 2 mods. Combine all of this with the fact that we're using Enhanced Impact Induction, which makes it so that when we cause damage with a melee attack, we greatly reduce our grenade cooldown, We have a very useful and powerful melee ability here that we can use almost anytime we want. We can follow this hammer strike up with our trench barrel shotgun for some additional damage, and when you take into account the tempered metal perk, which allows our solar ability kills to grant nearby allies movement speed and reload speed, you can see how this power and damage not only helps us but our team as well. What we have not discussed yet is the way that we utilize charges of light and how we get them in the first place. We did mention that we have empowering finish on, which gives us a charge of light every time we use a finisher, which is happening a lot since we're recharging our melee ability that way. But we also have taking charge on, which means that any of the orbs we generate when killing enemies with Lumina, which really only requires a double kill, which is very easily done, when we pick up one of those orbs we actually gain another charge of light. And all of these charges of light are used to fuel the high energy fire mod, which makes it so that while we're charged with light, we gain a bonus to weapon damage, and when we kill an enemy, one of these charges is lost. High energy fire gives us an additional 20% weapon damage bonus whenever we have a charge of light. Now when you combine this with the fact that we already have the 35% weapon damage bonus from Lumina, as well as the 30% damage debuff on enemies from Hammer Strike, we are dealing a ridiculous amount of damage with all of our weapons. And what's incredible about all these buffs and debuffs is that they are very easily reproduced within any activity, they don't require many resources, and can really be done multiple times during any encounter. And all of this was really leading up to the final synergy for this build, and really the main DPS that we'll be using against bosses. Falling Guillotine, as many of you know, is one of the strongest options for boss DPS at the moment, and when you combine this with boss spec and lucent blade, it is already very powerful. But again, with this build, we get a 35% weapon damage bonus from Lumina, a 30% damage debuff on enemies from Peregrine Greaves, a 20% damage bonus from high energy fire. We are doing plenty of damage, especially when we combine this with the Whirlwind Blade perk, if you can get that on the Falling Guillotine. So let's just go over that main combo that puts all of these moving pieces together to make that huge DPS potential when it comes to a boss. First, we collect noble rounds and charges of light thanks to the Lumina. We then buff all of our allies with a 35% weapon damage bonus, which also applies to ourselves. Then we switch to our shotgun and start sprinting. After sprinting for a few seconds, our Hammer Strike ability will be ready, and then we jump into the air and use that Hammer Strike on our opponent with the combo of Peregrine Greaves. This does a ton of damage thanks to the addition of Solar Plexus, and it also debuffs that enemy with a 30% damage debuff. This activates Trench Barrel on our shotgun, which we then empty into that boss with the addition of High Energy Fire, and after Trench Barrel is over, we switch to our sword and start swinging away. After that first sword strike hits, we activate Lucent Blade, which gives us further damage on our sword, and this takes away one charge of light. And then after swiping at the enemy 2 to 3 times to stack up Whirlwind Blade damage stacks, we then go into a fully charged power attack with the Falling Guillotine, doing the huge chunk of damage that we're looking for. And remember, this damage is being boosted by the Lumina, High Energy Fire, the debuff on that enemy, Whirlwind Blade, and Lucent Blade all at the same time. And with that combo complete, any boss that you're attacking is really going to be hurting at that point, if not dead already. But that will about do it for the commentary on this video. There was a lot of information here, so I really appreciate you sticking around to the end. If you like what you've seen, check the description of this video to see where else you can find me. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.